It's all yours, Raymond.
All right, welcome everybody. Note, I don't know if anybody saw Michelle's emails or stuff. We're going to be missing a few people today. Jonathan is going to be out, and Antonio's going to be out as well. So thanks, Alan, for volunteering to do notes and stuff today. Greatly appreciated. So if are you going to do roll call, Michelle, or is Alan going to do roll call?
No, I'll do roll call. I'll do
Okay.
roll call, and then we'll do the approval of the minutes in March, and then we'll go to the public comment.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Antonia's not here, as Raymond mentioned. We've got Lucia. I saw you.
Here.
Alicia.
Hi, I'm here.
Wonderful. Brian.
Hello.
Hello. Jake.
Here.
Alan.
Here.
Thought I might have. Michael, are you there? Thought I saw Michael somewhere, but he had said he wasn't coming. Okay, Michael's not here. Paul's not here. Raymond, you're here. Christopher Johnson. Not yet. Joe? Thought I said Joe. Nope. Okay. Jamie, I saw Jamie.
Here.
Aileen. Kurt.
Here.
Chris Pacheco.
Yeah.
Had I said Julie? Julie's joined us. I thought you weren't going to be with us, so thank you for showing up.
I'm only going to be here for the first half. I'm at a conference, supposed to be doing other stuff, but I didn't want to miss at least the public comment part. So I'll dividing the time, but thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. In Tangier?
I'm here. Are we doing roll call? I just got here.
Oh,
Okay.
Wonderful. Good timing. Good timing. And then Manny?
I am here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Wonderful. Okay. Anybody else join while I was doing roll call? Okay. Let's go on. If you don't mind, Raymond, I'm going to segue right into the minutes.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. You all had an opportunity to review the minutes this last week. Was there any additions or edits you wanted to make to the March minutes? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So what I'd like to do is have a proposal to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes. Can I get a second?
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Excellent, very efficient. Minutes have passed, or minutes have been approved, and I'm gonna turn it back to Raymond.
All right. We're going to kick it off with public comments, our 20-minute public comment.
We have 4 people signed up so far. Let me see if the 4 are there, at least the first one. Jessica Curley will be our first person coming over. And Jessica, let me move you over, and then we'll once Jessica joins us. Jessica, you have 3 minutes once you're fully in. There she is. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for taking this today. My public comment today is regarding the Lift and Lime scooters, particularly the scooters and bicycles that are left in the middle of the rights of way on sidewalks. So I understand that Lift Lime and the city of Denver have agreed to specific parking rules, such as not leaving them in the middle of a walkway a certain distance, so that there's at least 5 feet of walking space, at least 1.5 feet from a building, etc. So that's one part of my understanding. Another is that Lift and Lime would install 375 to 675 parking stations in the city, and fund an engagement to plan and educate riders on safety and proper use. However, bikes and scooters are constantly left in the middle of sidewalks. In my neighborhood alone, I live in Uptown. Since December, I've taken over 175 photos of scooters and bikes left in sidewalks. I have notified Lift and Lime of almost every single one. And recently, a few weeks ago, found out that I could also upload these to PocketGov or 311. And so I've done that for about a dozen so far. So my questions for you are Lift and Lime upholding the agreement to install these parking stations and educate riders? How is correct parking being enforced? And conversely, if incorrect parking is being punished? And what happens to complaints submitted to 311, just to make sure that Lift and Lime are actually getting these notifications? And in closing, I feel like there's a lot of money potentially being left on the table for the city of Denver to make sure that Lift and Lime are actually doing what they agreed to do. If they're using our sidewalks for parking spaces, you know, those are paid by taxpayers who live there. And we want to make sure that those are being used for the purposes of pedestrian walkways and aren't blocking those walkways for people who need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Jessica.
Okay. The next speaker is David Mincer. David, I'm going to promote you to speaker. David, let us know when you've joined us. There he is.
Hi, there I am. I'm not at home, so hopefully my network holds. I just wanted to take a minute and respond to some of the discussion from last month on DRCOG, especially on the I-25 and Broadway project that came up yet again in the discussion. And I think there was an offer to have someone from that project come and kind of explain, you know, its merits and why, and you know, how it might be multimodal. And I just wanted to say, I don't think we need a project manager to come here and tell us that a $40 million highway ramp is really a pedestrian or bike project. I think it's pretty clear it's a highway expansion. What we need to know is why that project was prioritized above all the other really good projects that have been proposed in the city. I sent out an email this morning at the DRCOG 2020 tip that showed the scores of the different projects, and it showed that DRCOG actually ranked that project lower. The Broadway bike lane north to Civic Center was ranked higher, but Denver, who was DPW at the time, ranked the highway project above, and therefore it got the funding while the bike lane did not. So I was hoping that we could investigate where that scoring comes from. I know Nick Williams sits on the sub-regional forum committee that ranked those projects, so maybe he could answer directly why that highway project in 2020 was ranked above so many other multimodal projects on that list. Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you, David. Okay, our third speaker is Paul Fort. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, Paul. I'm going to promote you to speaker. Just let us know when you've joined.
Hello, can you guys see and hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm joining today to bring up serious safety concerns for 17th and 18th Avenues in City Park West in District 9. I'm going to focus on 18th since it's scheduled for full resurfacing this year per DOTI street maintenance and improvement map, while 17th is not. For context, 18th is a one-way westbound street, which has 3 lanes of traffic, plus street parking on the north side between York Street and Marion Street. And the speed limit is 30, but people often drive significantly faster. And so this makes it dangerous for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers to cross 18th. Since I've moved to 18th and Gaylord in January 2021, I've witnessed an alarming amount of serious car accidents, usually a T-bone resulting in a car, in cars being towed away and people taken away in ambulances. For example, if we just look at 18th and Gaylord alone, in the last 3 months, I was home to witness 2 such major accidents in February and earlier this month, both of which occurred in the mid-morning in good weather, where a car crossing 18th and Gaylord was T-boned by a car speeding down 18th. And these are not outliers. Denver's own traffic accident data shows 25 accidents on 18th alone between York and Marion in the last 12 months, which is more than 2 per month on average. I think that's unacceptable. And this danger is primarily driven by the wide street, which causes drivers to speed and causes blind spots and extra time in the intersection when crossing. On a daily basis, I hear honking and tire screeching due to sudden braking, and I'm always just waiting for the loud bang of another accident. Full resurfacing of 18th would require repainting traffic lines. So this is a perfect opportunity to make the street safer for everyone and make the neighborhood more livable. There's not enough traffic on 18th to really justify 3 lanes of traffic. So I'd like to propose changes similar to those on 31st near Downing. 18th is slightly narrower than 31st, but it can support a separated 7-foot bike lane with plastic bollards, the existing 8-foot parking lane, and 2 11-foot lanes of traffic. And I am showing an example of how that could look right there. And so I think it's worth considering this as an option, considering that the traffic lines will need to be repainted anyway. So I'd like to ask you guys to consider making this change to make it a safer street for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Our last speaker is, I don't see, Jay Morse. Doesn't seem like he's on. Okay, well then I'm going to, let me do something over here. So Jay, if you're over in the attendees, could you put something in chat so I can know you're there? Okay, maybe Jay wasn't able to join us. But I do have and this is up to.
Michelle, I did notice there's someone on the phone that has their hand raised that didn't have
I
a
do
name.
too, and there's another one, John had his hand raised too. So let me do this. John, since we have time, if it's okay with the board, there's 2 people that have their hand raised. I'll admit them. Is that okay, everybody? Since we have time. Okay, John, I'm going to move you over. John, let us know when you've joined.
There we go. My apologies. I was certain I had signed up for today. Hi, my name is John Rickey. I'm called today because I've reached the limits of my frustration recently on attending a DOTI community meeting on the Bruce Randolph bike lane. DOTI seems to be systematically, perhaps systemically incapable of not watering down bike infrastructure, despite Denver Moves plans being approved, despite Blueprint Denver, despite the inverted pyramid, despite best practices throughout the world and the country, even their own fuzzy shaded graph which shows which types of infrastructure are appropriate for which contexts. In the case of this lane on Bruce Randolph, showed definitively outside the fuzzy part that it should have been a protected lane, and yet it was still downgraded to paint. What is the point? What is the point of having these plans if we can't implement them? What is the point of Vision Zero if it's going to be simply swept aside every single time it gets a little bit rough? The Marion Street bike lane that just opened had its curbs reduced in height due to interference from the fire department, and now it's made it easier for people to park in it. This city seems, like I said, systemically incapable of doing a good job on bike infrastructure, and it really turns one off of trying to come in here and make a difference when you guys won't even follow your own rules. Your own rules, you ignore them. And so I wanted to speak my frustration on that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, John. And there's someone else that has their hand up. I'm going to promote them if it's okay with you guys. Let's see if I can. They're on a phone. Hi, welcome.
Hi, this is Jay Morse.
Hey, Jay. Sorry about that. Thank you for joining us.
No, that's okay. I realized I had to dial in and I wasn't sure how to actually get to that point since I wasn't on the computer. So, but anyway, I'm actually making these comments for someone else. Jacob Shutt is his name. And this is his comments. Thank you for taking the time to hear my comments on the right-of-way fencing obstructions within our Capitol Hill community. I'm currently working and unable to attend this meeting. I have two concerns. My first concern is home/land owners installing and maintaining illegally fencing and rocks within the right-of-way areas within our community, blocking sight lines for pedestrians, cyclists, other cars, and also creating tripping hazards and stealing access to the space that is the right-of-way. That by law needs to be clear and free from obstructions. My second concern is a lack of enforcement by DOTI. Choosing not to take action in addressing this issue is an action unto itself. I would ask the department to enforce the laws and regulations as written. Once again, thank you for your time and hearing my concerns about the safety and well-being of our beautiful neighborhood and the community. Again, it was these comments are from Jacob Shutt, an Emerson Street resident, and my name is Jay Morse, also in Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Raymond, I'm going to turn the meeting back to you. That's our 6 speakers. I think Tim might have his hand up, Raymond.
No, that's a mistake on my part. I'm sorry.
Okay, Raymond, back to you. I can't hear you.
All right, there we go. Thank you everybody for your public comments. Really appreciate it. Very informative. Our next item on the agenda would be the report from the DOTI leadership.
Raymond, I'll take this one here. Adam was going to join us, but unfortunately he's under the weather today. So I've got a few items. One in particular, we've got a designated. So the construction fencing got an update for y'all on that. So I'll save that for that agenda item here. A few items I wanted to call out. So you guys remember we received a presentation on the volume-based trash pricing from Jessica Lawley here. I think that was last month. Everything blurs together on there. So that will be going to its first subcommittee meeting, City Council subcommittee meeting here. I believe we are tentatively scheduled for the April 26th. On there, and this will definitely be, I think we talked about this. This is a big deal, and really would encourage both you, your communities, speak with your council members to make sure they're getting the information they need from us. We've really tried to do a lot of background work on this, but this is I think one of the bigger policy shifts that the city's undertaken, as it relates to the environment and to climate, and could potentially have a pretty big impact on our diversion and how we are getting rid of waste. So, like I said, look for that. The LUTI, the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee, which is a subcommittee of the full City Council, 10:30 on Tuesday, the 26th. So by all means, feel free to tune in. But yeah, make sure that your respective council member, if you represent a council member, feels properly educated. And if there's any questions or anything we can help provide more information on, very glad to do that. That's something that is big. That is something that's going to be a challenging fight's probably not the right word, but I anticipate it'll be a challenging process to get through with a lot of robust discussion. Just want to make sure everyone's informed on that. Probably also have seen in the news that the city received or announced that it will receive approximately $350 million through the Army Corps of Engineers for South Platte River project. So this is a floodplain management project, environmental project that covers both Denver and some Adams County. So we're partnering with them to hopefully reduce the floodplain impacts there along the river, as well as on Weir and Harvard Gulch. This was a pretty exciting news. I think we were one of the few municipalities that received an award, and one of the biggest awards as well. So very excited for that, and to get that project up and running. That'll have a pretty big impact. Even just day to day, if you live in a floodplain, you likely, if you have a mortgage, are required to have flood insurance. Things that can reduce that or move people out of the floodplain can really lower the price on flood insurance. And that's just a start. Of course, not flooding is also a great co-benefit of that, but very excited about that. And then last thing, I think since we've last met, the South Broadway bike lane project, which is basically from kind of the center, which is the Broadway and I-25, up to, I believe it is Civic Center. That has gone out to bid to build. That went out on the end of March. Bids due by May 5th. Likely will contracting process go through the fall. So kick off in the fall with about 12 months to construct that. So very excited to get that up and running. I think there were some other questions on the northern section of that project above Civic Center. And I'm going to have our transit director come to our next meeting. Wanted to make sure this one stayed dedicated to the budget, but we'll have our transit director, David Kretzinger, come in and really kind of explain the Broadway to I-25 project, how it interacts with some of our other multimodal projects on there. And I think that is what I had. Happy to answer any questions. And I think we go right into the fencing after this, but happy to answer any question in the interim. Mr. Chair, I'll hand it back to you. Oh, Mr. Cohen.
All right, I just snuck in there. First of all, I wanted to give a congrats to you and all the DOTI staff that worked on the floodplain project. Curious if that was something that was going to happen, but this sped it up, or this is a project we wouldn't have been able to undertake without the federal funding.
I would say more the latter. You know, it's a project that we had framed out for basically since I started 4 years ago. I think coming from Houston, they trotted me out as an example of what not to do prior to that. But so we had it kind of all ready to go in search of federal funding. But, you know, a $350 million, you don't find that under a rock or under a cushion here. So no, it really allows this to happen. Whereas before, I don't see how we could have delivered it without a big injection of federal funding like this.
Wow, extra congrats then.
Thank you. I had very little to do with the success, but I will certainly pass that on to the team.
Thank you.
Other question?
Nick, quick follow-up to that.
Yes.
For the less inclined like myself, what does that mean practically? Is that additional dams, or is it like catch basins, or what will happen along that area?
A lot of it will be kind of naturalizing the river, which allows for better management of the floodplains. That's about as far as I can go before I start either making things up or giving incorrect information. I can get some information on that project out to this group, and then certainly if we would like a presentation. This is not anything that's going to happen overnight. You won't see shovels in the ground tomorrow. It's coming fast, but I would be happy to provide more information or have a presenter come in and speak to the project.
That's exciting. Thanks.
Tangier.
Hello. Yes. Okay. Nick, sorry, I'm going back to the public comment about the I-25 widening, and I'm wondering if if we have on the agenda next month or sometime soon to talk about the I-25 widening, and not to put you on the spot and like answer the questions about the criteria, but I am now very interested to know how that happens and what the process is for.
Yeah.
You know, if like Dr. Cog makes one recommendation and the city rates it a different way, you know.
Yeah, no, we can. So David Krutzinger is our transit director. We've got a few different groups talking about this because we've talked before. I think I mentioned before, you know, it is not simply a highway widening. It is a highway widening, or not. Let me walk that back. A ramp improvement there. I think it ends up the ramp becomes wider on there, which then will facilitate some multimodal, some of which you've already seen on, say, Ohio on there, and then some of the other connecting to that Broadway station, as well as, of course, the transit station in there. When I say Broadway station, I mean the development going in there on the old gates on there. So yeah, if we can wait until next month, I think really get into the nitty gritty. Again, I felt like, and I think the chair and committee felt like the budget was the primary driver for this one. But yeah, have them come in and we can go into as much detail as we want. We'll have the right project team in there.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Nick.
That will probably have to be in June, Nick.
Oh no.
Well, because Denver moves everyone, I think, is coming in May. But so we'll look at the timing.
We'll see.
I just want to give I want to give both topics the time they need.
Agreed.
And not rush through it. So we'll see. But I have those written down as two topics coming up.
There's too much good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Next on the agenda, we have unpermitted encumbrances and fences in the right-of-way.
All right, and I will take this one as well. I think this group likely remembers, but just as review, an issue the city has been facing lately is residents, and you heard it in the public comment, placing unpermitted fencing. Most of the time it is the kind of the orange temporary fencing. We have seen some folks putting rocks and boulders in there. We've seen some folks putting more permanent fencing in there. We had a member from our right-of-way services team come in a few months ago or a couple months ago and kind of describe there is no, what we do issue are permits for the purpose of regrowing vegetation. And that is not that does not mean it is a appropriate tool to discourage folks from camping on tree lawns or the right-of-way. We do not issue permits to do that. We do not ask people to do that. That is unpermitted use of the right-of-way on there. The challenge we've been facing is, of course, capacity, staff capacity for inspection on that. We, as Mike said, you know, our the permit requests not only did not drop throughout the pandemic, but 19, 20, 21 have been record years for permits, permit requests. And with those, you know, if you think of some of the large developments, those are very intensive. When we are looking at how, you know, how the right of way is going to be used with these developments, ensuring that it is safety. So the prioritization has been on those projects, making sure that those large projects, for instance, you know, I live near Broadway and Evans, and there's a major development going in there. And you see, and I was bragging to my wife about the covered parking. I'm sorry, the covered walkway that allows that sidewalk on South Broadway to remain open. So things like that is where the priority have been. Now, that doesn't mean that that means it's okay for the fencing. It certainly isn't. But we are challenged with a capacity issue right now. Of course, similar to every other municipality, organization, anything, we are at about 75% staffing level, so about a 25% vacancy level. So that has, and that is very much true in the right-of-way services. And so that has caused our inspectors to not be able to spend as much time on this as they would like. Basically, what is occurring right now as we get these 311 requests in, inspectors are going by, and if they see something that they deem to be a major safety issue with the fencing, they will get out and engage with the adjacent property owner, recognizing that that is not happening at the rate that residents would like to see in the area on their working with our city attorney's office, a right-of-way services team, and then also our right-of-way enforcement team. And what we are doing now, so our inspectors are, as folks have put in 311, our right-of-way services inspectors are going through and working through those schedules, the 311 complaints on there. We are staffing up our right-of-way enforcement agents. So we have basically two types: right-of-way 1, right-of-way 2 agents. Right-of-way 1 are going to be kind of your earlier career typical parking tickets. Right-of-way 2 get into the making sure that patios, chairs, you know, for restaurants, things that have encroachment permits are being performed properly. We'll also be utilizing them and have been utilizing them for the dockless mobility program. So the scooters and bikes, making sure that those are being parked properly as well. And we are going to have them also have this as one of their focus areas as well. And what that means is in the next few months, as we continue to staff that group up, we've started to finally make some headway with staffing on there. That will become more of a priority for not just right-of-way services, but also adding in the right-of-way enforcement team. We feel like that will make a good dent. Still using the 311 complaints, those we've got now lists of properties to go out and inspect and potentially enforce on there, still in conjunction with right-of-way services on there. And we think that will allow us to make better headway on getting a better handle on these out in the right-of-way on there. One suggestion, Jake and I had a few conversations around this, was kind of a deputizing of residents to be able to go out. Met with our city attorney on there. There was, like all attorneys, discomfort on potentially using residents in that fashion. So Jake, that may be, I don't know, maybe we can try to think of some other ideas on education or something out there, but there was a real discomfort around potentially deputizing residents, both from kind of a safety standpoint, an equity standpoint, and just a general, you know, liability, as lawyers always like to talk about on there. So that is, as of right now, that is what our plan is. We think that will allow us to start to get a better handle on it, both utilizing kind of a little bit more systematic with our right-of-way services, but then bringing in our right-of-way 2 agents to have this be one of their focus areas on there. I see some hands. I'm going to stop there and start answering questions. I think, Jamie, I saw yours first, and then Lucia.
Yeah, I had sent out the letter to most of the members a few weeks ago. This has been a dominant subject when it comes to public input. I'm still not feeling like we have all the information we need to give you a proper recommendation. And I mean, there's so many facets to this subject, you know, safety, parking, aesthetics. And I really think we need to take a deeper dive and get more specific. So my recommendation, because we can't make a decision in 15 minutes. We really probably should refer this to a subcommittee. Get the original documentation. You know, why did we start this in the first place? Why do we give people this right to do that? Does it need to be shortened? You know, and I mentioned that in the letter, but all those have to be vetted out with the membership here. So I appreciate your guys making an effort. But I still don't feel like I have enough information to give you a nod and say, oh yeah, that's a great job, or that's a great idea. So my suggestion is that this really should go to one of our new subcommittees to really be vetted out and give you proper recommendations.
Love it, and be happy to support that.
Okay.
Lucia.
Jamie, I like that suggestion. I just want to say, for those of us who've lived in Denver for a long, long time, there used to be a program called Neighborhood Ambassadors. And this was like in the late 90s, early 2000s. And what it was, a lot of times people are in violation of different things and they don't know it, you know, and we have to depend on, you know, 311 or whatever. But if you became a neighborhood ambassador, they gave you a packet and it had different forms and things that if you wanted, you don't confront the person or anything. Maybe you put a piece of paper on their door that says, hey, did you know, without them being cited or anything else, just sort of an education. And it was done by citizens. They weren't arresting or writing citations. They were just providing information. And the program was called Neighborhood Ambassadors. And I think that you might want to look back in your archives, find somebody who had been around a while who can remember that. Thank you.
I think Jake and then Chris.
All right. Sorry, I've always got to have comment on this one only because the residents.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
The residents of my neighborhood contact me a lot about this topic, so forgive me for taking up air so often on this one. But I think you can see from the public comment, it really is affecting District 10 pretty heavily. Just to clarify, what we are talking about, if we consider any committee discussion, is we are talking about currently illegal and unpermitted fences. This is not a period that's shortened, because the correct period that they could have is 0 days under this current policy. So I think that's something to consider. But I do think, I guess I continue to hear concerns about the way the 311 cases are being closed. I personally submitted one that had a metal fence totally surrounding a fire hydrant. And I know that was responded to with no violation found, which is kind of the standard response these days to this issue. So I hear you, Nick. I really appreciate the effort. I'm just having a hard time squaring that with the responses I'm seeing to 311 tickets or the forwarded responses I'm receiving from people in the neighborhood. They are just consistently getting no violation found, even though, we've discussed 100 times how they are not permitted. So I think it's just I would rather not get a response at all than get my ticket closed and told there's no violation found. I don't know if there's some sort of incentive structure that's encouraging agents to more rapidly close those tickets than close them correctly, but something seems to not make sense there to me.
Understood. And yeah, that would be definitely frustrated. Definitely not a incentive other than I think just the pressures of time on there. But again, recognize that would be a frustrating response. Chris.
Thanks, Nick. And Jake, thanks for that background information. That was helpful because that was part of my question that I have for this. Nick, you mentioned that, a lot of this is either street occupancy permit issue or minor encumbrance permit issue, which in my mind lends to, well, if those are permitted actions, then those have time frame to them. But it sounds like from Jake's like, no, these are just people putting up fences. And it's a problem no matter how many inspectors you get, they're just going to be up there. So I'm wondering, does our GIS, does the GIS team at the city and county of Denver have capability, for us to see like, here's the permits that are out there so we can understand like, hey, those are illegal. Those aren't just, actually permitted construction or encumbrances. Those aren't permitted uses. Is there any way for us to see that by chance?
I don't know. I can find out though.
And that would help Jake just like, hey, I can go to the map, like that's not a permitted use. That's, that's not construction. That's not encumbrance permit. So.
Yeah, I know we've done a few different mapping exercises around encroachment permits, things like that. And I know we are currently doing kind of a major asset analysis. Now, we don't consider unpermitted fences an asset, certainly, but yeah, that's a good question, Chris. Let me look into that.
Okay, thank you.
I think I saw a comment from Jamie that, yeah, it's both. It's people improperly getting permits and people just saying the heck with the permit and doing it on there.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the 2023 budget kickoff.
And I think with this, there he is.
Yeah, I will go ahead and get started. Here, just 1 second. Oh, I'm getting a message, host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Okay, let me correct that. Okay, try it now.
Okay. Let's see. Here we go. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, very good. So I wanted to, I guess this is a time of the year where we're doing the kickoff for the upcoming year's budget development process. And I wanted to provide just a general high level overview. We unfortunately at this point don't have any firm like dates and timelines, but I think that likely by the time we have our next meeting or subsequent meeting, a lot of that will be flushed out at the city level that hopefully we can begin to share that out. So our agenda really today is going to be the financial structure and terminology, just some of the budget development focus areas, the general timeline and some specific items on that timeline that are critical, the discretionary capital scoring criteria and how that influences the maintenance allocation process, our equity map and index, and lastly, how the TAB here can have the most impact through this process. And then lastly, we'll go through any questions anyone may have. So the financial structure and terminology, I think when you think of budget and the city's budget, particularly here in the city and county of Denver as a whole, you really have to begin to sort of break down that structure and understand the various different funds that are associated with that. So there's the general fund, which is the primary fund that's used to record all expenses and revenue associated with core responsibilities of the city. There then is an enterprise fund example, which is a type of fund that is set up to sell, that in regards to selling goods and services to the public for a fee. And that largely follows the same sort of structure that most typical private businesses typically embrace. Special revenue fund, that obviously money that's allocated to a specific project or purpose, adds an extra level of accountability and transparency, so that way, if you have one of these funds or if one of these funds are in place, you know that they are going to go towards that particular intended purpose. And then lastly, a capital improvement fund, which is a dedicated fund dedicated to funding items as part of a capital program, whether that be projects, equipment acquisitions, or other eligible capital expenses that roll up into a capital improvement fund.
Earl, could you make this full screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
1 second. I thought the way it was showing. Is that better? All right. The budget development focus areas and scoring criteria. So as I mentioned earlier, we have not received any sort of dates or particular priorities from those above in the mayor's office, as well as other areas on what those priorities will be for 2023. But regardless of what they are, we do have some critical focus areas within priorities that we constantly strive to work towards, right? So here on the left, we have obviously improving the safe and efficient delivery of the essential services that keep our city running and our residents and visitors moving. So things typically, trash, recycling, street maintenance, of the like. And then providing leadership and support to various infrastructure and maintenance programs, as well as compliance with legal mandates that obviously support the equitable and long-term growth of the city and county of Denver. And then our constant working towards improving the customer experience and community engagement, so that way we can work towards making sure all of our programs, initiatives, and services are meeting the needs of our community that we're serving. So this is the general high-level sort of timeline associated with the budget development process, sort of broken down into 4 quadrants. The first being the April to May timeframe. Obviously, this is where we'll begin doing the budget kickoff and various kickoff activities over the course of the coming weeks. So a part of that really is what we're doing here today. Another part of that is us working with the Department of Finance and the mayor's office to solidify priorities and timelines and dates. And obviously, another part of that is TAB obviously providing their menu of priorities associated with that, our scoring criteria, and the executive director review and recommendations are then provided to the Department of Finance at the city. And so then the May through September timeframe typically is the part that's the most meatiest, because that's where a lot of the prioritization and things become a lot more solidified in terms of reviewing requests and expansion requests and recommendations, and syncing up the operating budget and capital budget sort of recommendations to the city CFO, and then finally concluding with recommendations to the mayor's office for what that budget should look like. And then in September, we're really moving the dial on a number of things, such as DOTI presenting to the mayor's office on our initiatives and focus areas for the year in alignment with the mayor's office, as well as if we have any other requests from other agency departments and expansion requests. And then finally, towards the end of September, working to get those sent over in a budget letter to the city council from the mayor. And then lastly, the month of October, council's primarily doing their work to review requests, provide questions on those requests and expansion requests, and negotiating with the mayor's office on changes. And then finally, the proposed annual budget for the following year being presented to the public, and then there's an adoption period that's shortly thereafter. Discretionary capital funding scoring criteria. So we have a scoring criteria that we work to apply to all projects, programs, and initiatives as part of our planning process, and that usually informs how resources are allocated. So there is a 3-tier scoring system that you see down here on the bottom left, and then that's weighted for final recommendation. So the first part of that, tier 1, driven primarily by data-driven analysis, driven by safety, congestion mitigation, safety good repair, equity, and environmental stewardship, along with multimodal connectivity. Tier 2 being having these items align with our mission and vision, safe movement, reduction of delays, and preserving the existing transportation system, and as well as promoting accessibility and mobility, and providing that level of equity support to our vulnerable populations. And then lastly, that tier 3 piece, including the alignment with the citywide vision, as well as the Denver Right planning process. And so all of that concludes into the weighted criteria and the scoring. And then all of that data then feeds our maintenance allocation process, as well as many other processes associated with what's included in our capital discretionary area. And then we provide final recommendations with the scoring, as well as the allocation process to the executive management team. So this is a map of our equity index. Particularly in general, it says here spark, rise, and elevate, but in general, I think that this could also apply to various other elements of the capital program and many other ways of how we allocate funds to particularly the areas most in need. So a lot of the data that informs this is things that you would find typically on a census style data. So the number of households with no cars, women-headed households, the number of minority households, and many other things. And that ultimately feeds the equity index map and provides a score. And you can see the various different project types and how those are distributed across the map and index. Lastly, but certainly most importantly, how the Transportation Advisory Board can have the most impact, obviously that being one of the first parts of our priority listing. So providing a pretty extensive memorandum of the 2023 goals and priorities that are consistent with the Denver Mobility Action Plan, as well as providing input to the proposed budget once it becomes publicly available here in the fall. And then even more bigger, obviously, proactively encouraging members of the community to participate and be engaged in that public comment process during the budget process as that becomes. And then that was the last slide, unless you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns.
You see a hand from Jake.
Yeah, I had a question, Earl, on the scoring criteria. I guess it's a 2-part question, so I might let you answer and then finish. But in the scoring, is each criteria in each tier, is it considered equal, or is it weighted?
So these would be weighted based on city priorities. If I'm getting correct, Nick and or Zach, I believe these are weighted not all equally, but definitely with the more important things having the highest weight.
Yeah, you're correct, Earl. These are weighted based on city priorities and the priority inputs that we received from our council partners, from now you guys, and from the mayor's office. That'll be weighted as we continue forward. So, if you're looking at tier 1, for example, a lot of stuff falls out of there through tier 1. They just don't meet those criteria. We go into tier 2. And then the weighting changes a bit. So Jake, it's a good question, but yeah, that's exactly right. Those are weighted as they go through the tiers and through the process.
Okay, I'm trying to navigate, given like historical budget priorities, how like projects are weighted, like in particular, with the congestion mitigation one, right? I could see many instances where that weighting would directly net the opposite of something like safety or multimodal connectivity, right? Depending on how we're looking at it, if we're looking at if people move per miles rather than like vehicle miles traveled, right? Those are different metrics that are going to get us drastically different things in the congestion mitigation. And just curious, like how do we keep that one is inconsistent with a lot of city plans. So trying to navigate how that one's squared up.
Right. And so when we do stuff like that, Jake, that's also a good question and a valid point. You know, I think probably the easiest way I could help boil this down a little bit is that, you know, if DOTI's number one operating priority is, let's say, solid waste and trash collection, right? That doesn't mean that there aren't needs in our operational component, in our project delivery component, things of that nature. So even though there is the scoring and prioritization process, we're aware of other problems that are out there and may enable themselves to sort of buck some of the process a little bit and get a little bit ahead of the line. It comes down to sort of the funding allocation and what are the factors driving the overall prioritization of the project. And sometimes it's just a matter of this is really, really hot button beyond, you know, whatever the widget X is, and we're going to need to get this prioritized up. And so while we do run it through the scoring criteria process, we do keep some levels of this to understand that there's a congestion issue and we need to be on top of that more than, you know, potentially something else. And so I hope that answers the question. I know it seems a little bit nebulous, but there are some things that don't necessarily fit neatly into the scoring, and we watch for that and ensure that we're making the best decisions with our, you know, sometimes limited allocation into some of these funding areas.
I think that's helpful, Zach. I appreciate it. If possible, would love potentially like an example or just like how the weights actually work. Just love to see that at some point. I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I haven't been here in a minute, but I think we sent it earlier, so I'll get it back to the top of everyone's inbox after this meeting. And I think we sent the prior year scoring criteria and some of that data, but I could be talking out of turn too. Let me double check and we'll get that over to you guys.
Okay, my mistake if it's already been sent out.
No.
Important. It's also important to note, particularly when it comes to the scoring criteria, that every project is very individualistic on what that could entail based on the scope of said project. Alicia?
Hi, my question is really around the engagement process with community. And you said that there would be some forums or community opportunities for community input. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how they will be providing that input?
Right, so just every year we have, and Nick can obviously speak to this a little bit more, but for the budget development process and that whole essential 6-month period, there are a series of public comment periods where the public can then provide their inputs to the respective budget process and the priorities and things like that. So Nick, maybe you could add some color to that based on the specifics here of Denver, since this is technically my first year here.
And actually, probably Zach would be better to answer that. Hopefully I'm not putting Zach on the spot. I beyond what you said, of course, what you said was accurate, but if Zach has anything else to add.
No, you're right. You just caught me snacking. I haven't had lunch yet. You caught me with the mouthful. Sorry, Alicia. Let me handle this really quickly and then I'll be right back.
No worries, no worries.
I thought it was safe to snack, not safe to snack. We'll start setting that classification up. No, Nick and Roll are correct that there is public commentary through the entire process, that it comes through our council partners and various outreach efforts to ensure that we understand what the needs of the communities are. But you know, beyond that, I think there's probably some additional steps that have been taken to have some of those community groups that don't necessarily participate begin to participate more, especially coming out of the pandemic. And that's through, you know, some public outreach campaigns and work from both the mayor's office and council to better understand what the needs are within the community, as opposed to what, you know, council themselves or the mayor's office themselves thinks of those specific priorities, I guess. So apologies for not wording that well and for having to swallow food, but the moral is that there's definitely time for public comment, and we take it and accept it and roll with it quite a bit. And those actually inform the priorities that then drive the budget. So they have a voice, our communities have a voice prior to, so leading up to the budget process, during the budget process, and then the final public commentary as the budget's adopted. And like I said, things that can be done to encourage that participation have been invested in, will probably continue to be invested in for the foreseeable future. Does that help, Alicia?
Yeah, sort of. I guess I was trying to, oh, I'm sorry, was someone else about to?
So I wanted to add on to what Zach is saying. So really you can kind of bucket that into 3 different areas, right? So the city is going to have various elements of outreach meetings throughout different communities throughout the process, as well as what's likely to take place at City Hall, right? And then another level is going to be likely the meetings that happen at the councilman level as they engage within their community, of which you'll have to reach out to individual council members to see what that schedule looks like for the budget process, because each ward probably has something a little bit different. And then another element of that, which probably is the earliest element of the budget process that I had mentioned in the last end of the presentation, is getting with the TAB to ultimately inform what becomes the goals and the priorities within the memorandum that becomes submitted to us either over the next month or next month and a half or so, to then voice concerns, particularly to those that are active as part of this committee and board, to then inform that process and what is included.
So I guess what I was hoping or seeking, and I think some of this is just, I don't know, it's just sometimes in the way that I think. If there was a specific communications outreach community input strategy that weave through each of these parts of the process, so that as board members or advisory board members, we are able to specifically identify and work with community to be able to say, this is where in the process you will be contacted, and these are opportunities that are in the community. They're doing these 5 things for you to be able to participate in the process. They're specifically wanting your input. I'm just trying to figure out, as a board member, it said one of the ways that we can assist in this process is get our constituency or people that are that we're connected to involved in the process. And I want to be able to give them a specific way to do that, as well as the strategy of how their input is actually being used and considered. Because I know that in a community, and what we hear a lot in engaging in community is, we never were a part of the process. They started doing this before we had, but if there is a specific community outreach strategy, I think it would be helpful, not only for us as a board, but for you all to be able to demonstrate, this is our community outreach policy, our practice, or the way that we systematically engage community intentionally. And this is how we utilize the information. This is how we've utilized the information that has been provided from community. And so I hear that there are different pieces, which I think are great, that you all are doing, and you have it in your mind to engage community in a variety of different ways, but really just trying to understand what the actual process is and how that will be used to engage community. So just my thoughts.
No, it's a good point, Alicia. And one other thing that I'll just say is that we also understand that some of our community partner groups go out and do some of this work. I'm looking at Jake, my fellow Big Ten district member. Chun, the Capitol Hill United Neighbors, does I think a pretty decent job of doing that outreach, informing Councilman Hines, and also informing some of the folks in the mayor's office on what their concerns are in the community. So, I think maybe there's a way that we could potentially hone that a little bit more, but I think there's a lot of moving pieces, and I think we're probably careful about what our community groups, what the external community groups do versus what we do to keep the process streamlined and in place while still understanding that information. But it's definitely something that we can at least at very least look at and try and resource in future years as we move forward.
I can definitely, to add on to that, I think one of the most important things that maybe could be done right now, because each councilman and ward may have a process of how they engage their constituencies within their ward. So maybe starting with determining if what those processes look like for each ward, and sort of working your way backwards. And then maybe that could feed into a broader way of, okay, here's in general what communities are saying regarding the process. How can we coordinate those efforts to then best serve the city, right? Particularly for the things that overlap amongst different boards on needs in terms of engagement. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great start, and thank you for entertaining my thoughts. But I just, I just wanted to see what I feel like there are different pieces, but how do those pieces come together to form an actual formal community outreach plan that we can point to and say, this is the way that we're doing our community outreach. We're contacting the city council wards, in turn, the city council wards are reaching out to them. And also thinking about contacting city council wards. We know that really a lot of the people that make up our communities aren't engaged with the city council groups in our community. So how are we really reaching our grassroots communities, and are there groups that we're working through within that? But I don't want to take up too much more of all of the time.
I think that that's a very good, Alicia, that's a very good point. And I think that I'll try and look to see if there's anything officially out there on this topic that could be used to be shared with this meeting publicly. And I think that could potentially either answer a lot of questions or provide some clarity on what that looks like if it's out there. And I think that if it's not, then I think that's definitely a good opportunity for how we can improve engagement going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right.
I have a question. This is Tangier. Can I jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Going off of what Alicia said, Alicia, I appreciated your focus on how the input is used. I know the input's used. I've seen it used in processes. I've been a part of many of them, but I still hear from people like, well, really, how is our input being used? And it would be nice to be able to point to people who we know and say, well, in years past, like this kind of input was received, and here's how the budget was changed, or here's how that was used. I mean, you know what I mean? Why not actually point to specific examples that we can then give people, those of you who've been involved in the budgeting process forever, to say.
Interesting question, or an interesting statement, because I think that particularly with those that are much more active with their council members, a lot of these things they may be bringing up prior to the start of the budget cycle, and they maybe have been working closely with council to have things happen over the course of the budget year, to where by the time you get to the budget cycle, it's less about how do you inform that. It's more about the councilman has already been working towards these needs, and they've been in the budget already. So there's a direct way of influence, and there's an indirect way of influence. And that probably is more of the indirect way of influencing. And so in theory, we want more people to be on that indirect side, because that increases the amount of engagement that they have with the people that they've elected, right? And so obviously for those that maybe don't, I think there could be, to your example, definitely ways that could be definitely communicated on how that was influenced. But I think one of the earlier ways outside of that indirect process is this form right here in the memorandum, because you guys are one of the front lines on top of the community. And we have obviously the public comment period in the beginning. And I think working through subcommittees to then hone in on that, to try to be as I guess forceful or detailed within your memorandum as possible, to outline what the priorities are that are driven by the individuals that you are working for, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. It does, Earl. Yeah, the distinguishing between direct and indirect and where we are, that's helpful. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. Piggybacking on Earl and just seeing some of the stuff in the commentary in the chat, and I think we could probably follow up with some potential stuff here. But one thing, it looks like everyone's been asking for a specific example. One that I can give in recent memory is large item pickup or extra trash collection. As a result of the pandemic, that was moved to every 8 weeks as opposed to a monthly service through our solid waste collection. It did not make the cut for our first round ARPA restorations in early 21. And we had hoped to solve for that a little more progressively. And we also thought that potentially the lack of that tonnage was a little bit more aligned with some of our sustainability goals within the city. The activism on the grassroots level from our residents and from our engaged stakeholders had both council and the mayor's office help us prioritize this, and we worked to restore the service. And now we were back to every 4 weeks prior to the end of 21. So it became a budget item, but it also became a redeployment of resources in real time. So there are definitely ears out there. I think to Alicia's point, maybe there's some consolidation, but I think there's numerous examples of going from, hey, this wasn't prioritized, the mayor's office didn't see it, council didn't see it, DOTI didn't see it, to, oh my gosh, we're going to stop right now, and our budget process needs to include X amount of dollars to restore an essential service that residents are clamoring for. So it's a good point from both Tangier and Alicia. What I'll just say is that I think there's probably a lot of examples out there. And also, with an election year looming, I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of examples of I did X in response to Y. So just stay tuned to that as well. But obviously we can get ahead of that and help you guys understand some more specific stuff.
Thanks, Zach. That is exactly what I was looking for, like that type of example, Thank you.
No problem. It's also it's a little harder to pinpoint those. 21 was a good year 21 to 22 was a good year for those, but the cuts of the pandemic, the real-time cuts in 2020, and then the subsequent cuts in 21, it was really just about getting down and ensuring essential services continued. But I think if we look at the 19 budget, the 18 budget, both of which I was a part of, I think we could probably look at some examples where active engagement at the grassroots level made some changes, and they're probably just failing me right now, but I'll see what I can't follow up with, along with getting that scoring priority back to the top of you guys' inboxes.
All right. Oh, sorry, Alan.
Sorry, Earl, Zach, could you speak a little bit more to what you'd like to see from us on that memorandum that you all mentioned, a little more depth of how, Zach, you mentioned a little detailed, forceful, like what are some things that would be helpful with regards to that?
Well, I'm going to defer to Earl a bit because, he's the new boss and he's running the ship here, and I'm very happy to have him on our team here leading the way. But, I think there's probably some scoping to be done and some development to be done to understand, how you guys help us guide this process, or how, you help guide us so that we can lead this process through. I think in terms of specifics on the memorandum, I think that's probably something for the board to figure out a bit, but I think Earl could probably help set the table on this a little bit more.
Yeah, so we have the Denver Mobility Action Plan, right? That has a lot of items that I think that are within the purview of this board, but also many of the things that the city and the county is working towards over time to improve, right? So I think that any priority or goal that's consistent or included within that, or maybe that might be loosely related to it. I think that when you think about where we are now and where what constitutes this mobility action plan, and where you think that the priorities need to be based on where we are right now, I think that could be a starting point for what is included within your memorandum. And I didn't want to give too much sort of direction on this, because I think that it's probably best for the members of the board to then, review that and determine based on where we feel we've made progress this year and last year, and where we feel we need to go forward within the context of that plan to inform how you outline your goals and priorities for 2023. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for that direction. I appreciate it.
For sure.
Right, Zach and Earl, thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. A little bit ahead of schedule. Next on the agenda is the advisory board subcommittees. And do we have anything from what we discussed in last month's meeting.
Raymond, do you want me to show you the, I think everybody's bucketed into different categories. You want me to show that to everyone? At least
Yes.
where we are now. I don't know if everybody was part of this survey, but at least you got a starting point. So let me share that.
Yes, please.
Okay, can you see it? No. Okay.
No.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is where Jonathan left us. I believe the italicized text is, I don't know if this was self-appointed or self-bucketed or was assigned. So Raymond, I'll let you lead that discussion.
All right. Looks like Alan, Curtis, Chris, budget and finance. Alicia, Julie, Tangier, Manuel are in community engagement. And let's see, Brian, myself, Eileen, and Paul, who's not here today as well, I believe, operations. Lucia, Jake, Mike Garcia, Joe Levy, and Jamie Lewis are in policy. And let's see, Jonathan, Antonio, and Chris Johnson are in projects. So let's see, budget and finance, 3 people, community engagement 4, operations 4, policy 5, projects 3, 19 total. All right, anybody have anything to say?
I'm amazed at the breakdown here of there's like 3 and 4 people for each committee, and I don't think it was planned or
Yeah. Same here.
rather nice how it worked out that way.
Yeah, is everybody okay with where they were placed? Anybody have any objections? Do we have to vote on this or?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay, so.
But you can, but if anybody wants to change a category, now would be the time to speak up, because I think the next thing will be, okay, now what do you do? Right? What are we going to do for May, and really about the budget and the memorandum that Earl suggested, or that's going to be one of the biggest priority, and that's going to hit this top group here. So is anybody want to change their subcommittee? Not that this is a speak now and forever hold your peace, but obviously there's fluidity here, but is everybody okay? Okay, so probably the best thing to do next is talk about, so what does this mean now? What is going to be the deliverables? I mean, really talk about what's going to happen in May. Is this going to be an agenda item where each group presents out, which is what the PRAB does, or is it going to be, you know, what do you want your subcommittees to do moving forward?
Right, anybody have anything to say about their subcommittees and what they want them to accomplish for the future?
I mean, I think one good goal, Ray, is just to encourage everyone that's on it to find a time to meet between now and our next meeting in May. And maybe we just start by having each group report on what they discussed and allow those committees to come up with whatever they want their own agenda to be, to elect a chair or what have you, and go from there.
All right, yeah, good point, Ellen. All right, so yeah, I mean, if you guys want to split into or contact people who are in your same subcommittees and you know, find a time before our next meeting to get together and discuss what they want to accomplish. All right, Jake, go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just to make sure that we actually succeed at this, should we at least have someone self-nominate or be kind of the party responsible for each group? I'm just a little worried about trying to get everyone to step up all at once. It might be a little challenging.
Right. Go ahead, Chris, you had something as well?
I think it's a good idea to have the committees meet before we share our objectives. I think that we'll get a little bit better thought process out of that. I'm happy to coordinate the projects team, and I would just say that we'll vote on who wants to chair it when we get together.
All right. All right. Yeah. So I'll, Jamie.
Yeah, I'll take the lead on policy.
All righty. See, who wants to take the lead on budget?
I'm happy to work with Chris and Kurt and run with that, and then we can decide amongst ourselves for chair.
Okay. Okay. Community engagement.
I have a question about community engagement. I was like, do we know if this is just talking about like community engagement, how like DOTI does community engagement, or like how our committee is doing community engagement, or will we be deciding that at our first meeting? I'm also wondering if, yeah, I don't know if that's a question anybody can answer.
I would.
Also, I might consider moving. Budget and finance was my second. I chose community engagement because it's what I'm more familiar with, but maybe I should take myself out of my comfort zone. And this isn't helpful. It's all rhetorical. Sorry.
Well, I'll say this. I think that it would be cool to have someone take themselves out of their comfort zone. I looked at budget and financing as well. So if that's where you want to go, if you want to leave us, I think it would be great. I'm happy to provide support for the community engagement group. And again, at our meeting, we can find out what the focus is, and then also find out who would like to serve as the lead, etc. So I'm happy to do that and kind of coordinate us.
All right. Operation. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Alicia. Thank you, Tangier. Chris, did you have anything else to say, sir? No. Okay. Operations. I'm going to excuse myself from that one since I'm already co-chair. So, anybody from the operations group want to say anything, or should we just decide that next time we meet?
I'm having similar thoughts, around what the real purpose would be, the operations of what. And I think, around all the subcommittees, it does feel like we need some connective tissue as an overall board to be able to understand what the surface area is for us to even talk about, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I suppose it's something.
To provide some additional context to this, operations associated with if I'm correct, the delivery of city services. So like trash and recycle pickup, plowing, street sweeping, things of the sort, traffic operations, anything along the lines of that, if I'm not mistakenly.
I think the operations of this is the actual operations of the board.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that I was wrong.
One example could be, again, the fact that we have public comment, but we don't have any response to the public comment, and putting some kind of mechanism in place that if people come and speak, that we have a way to get back to them. The emails that we send everybody, they almost like go into a no man's land. So really kind of putting some tightening around how the board operates. I also, as Brian said, I also see the operations being how the committees actually operate also, and kind of putting some structure around that.
So it sounds like it should be titled board engagement and oversight versus operations.
Operations, which is part of their bylaws.
Okay.
It's the word that they came up with.
All right.
And does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Can't drop the file in chat, but we did define at some prior meetings what each of these subcommittees do, and I just dropped the description of all of them in chat. Hopefully that helps.
Oh, well, it looks like actually I was wrong and Earl was right. So sorry about that, Earl. You were right.
Oh, it's all right. I like being right.
I'm glad you were. So it looks like operations is not what I thought it was. It is actually about the operations component of DOTI.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is the document we voted on when we created the subcommittees. But it's just bullet points the way I could drop it in.
Just going to change it so it makes more sense. Now, the people that are on this committee, do you understand this? Is this what you thought it was?
Yeah, that's
Brian
what I
and
thought it
Raymond
was.
and Aileen.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. All right. So I guess we'll discuss when we break into our subcommittees, who wants to take the lead on that. See, policy, we have Jamie, and projects, we got Chris. And we appreciate it.
Before we leave this, could we have somebody from, I think it's just Raymond and Brian are the only two members of DOTI operations subcommittee that are on the meeting right now. Can we have one of you just at least be responsible for getting the four of you together before the May meeting?
Oh, I didn't realize Aileen left. I'll take responsibility for that.
Great, thank you.
Yep. All right, so is everybody okay with that? Anybody else has anything to add?
Exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Finally have our subcommittees lined up. All right, so we have odds and ends. Anybody have anything? This is an open time slot to discuss anything that wasn't on the agenda for today. Alan.
This is more of a comment than kind of a discussion. I just wanted to call out that several of the folks on this call on Saturday were at a dedication for the Marion Parkway or the Alexis Bounds Memorial Bikeway. And I just really wanted to personally thank the DOTI staff. It was really meaningful there to hear Alexis's widower, Teddy Bounds, speaking that he thinks that a bike lane like that could have saved his wife's life and that she'd be here today. It was great to have Emily Glockner there, the city traffic engineer, members of council, folks from advocacy groups, folks from the neighborhood. So I just, again, really wanted to thank the DOTI folks and say that, the stuff that you guys are doing, especially on safety projects for people that walk, people that bike, take transit is really making a difference. So just wanted to applaud you guys for that. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Alan. Anybody else has anything to add?
I'll pile on to Alan. I do think that so often we want more from DOTI because we've seen all the awesome things that DOTI's done. So that's where a lot of it comes from. And we're really excited to see all the things you guys roll out. It's every new DOTI truck that shows up in my neighborhood, I get a little excited like there's a Christmas Day package.
All right.
Me too, Jake.
E3.
All right, anybody else have anything to add?
I'll jump on the thank you train, and I'm so excited. Hopefully our pay-as-you-throw passes, and I will have compost or recycling service every week. Speaking of seeing more DOTI trucks. Yes, please.
All right, well, looks like we got through our agenda pretty quick today. unless anybody has any objections, I guess we can adjourn for the month, and just don't forget to, you know, get in contact with everybody who's in your specific subcommittee and schedule a time. But if anybody doesn't have any objections, go ahead and adjourn this meeting for the month.
Hey,
I have
Raymond.
one.
Yeah. Oh,
Raymond,
well,
I
I'm
have a
sorry.
question too. No, go. Alicia, I do too, right after you. Alicia, you go first.
Well, this is actually for you, maybe Michelle, and you probably, I think you sent this out already, but I may have filed it in the wrong place. But I just want to make sure I have everybody's contact information, because can you send that sheet again? I just want to make sure I can shoot out an email and follow up with a phone call if necessary for the people that are on the committee. I think I know everybody, but.
You got it. I don't think I have everyone's mobile numbers, but I have everyone's emails. So I'll send
That
that
would
to
be
you.
excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. And my only other thing is we have a request in from Denver Moves Everyone. If you guys remember, about 3 or 4 months ago, they came in and chatted with us, and they'd like to come back and show us the progress of where they are. And
Okay.
they've got some targeting that they need to discuss with us. It's going to be pretty lengthy, and they want to really dive in with the the board. So they'd like an hour of our next meeting, if that's okay with all of you. I kind of had to throw it out there. I know we're right in the middle of budget, but they really need to have some decision points made at this point in the process.
all right. Anybody want to vote for it? Just make sure we're all on the same page.
I think if anybody has an objection,
Yeah,
let me
that too.
shout
We don't have
out.
to for everything. Yeah. All right. Any objections?
So the
All right.
next meeting, we'll do Denver Moves Everyone, and then the rest of the meeting will be for the subcommittees, if that's okay.
All right. Fine with me. All right. Anything else, Michelle?
Nope, that's great. Thank you. Great
All
job,
right.
Raymond.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a good rest of April. See you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.